We shift to our gears into the next discussion of the day. This morning, now we are focusing on the effects of the COVID-19 on healthcare. And we shall be finding out what are the changes the coronavirus pandemic, the COVID-19, is bringing, especially when it comes to the healthcare sector. This morning, I'm joined by none other than Gokul Prem Kumar, the Vice President, Business Relations, Mediheal Group of Hospitals. Thank you very much for joining me this morning, and it's a pleasure having you, and for finding time to come to studio, Mr. Kumar.
Good morning, Mr. Ram.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks for hosting us on your show.
How are you doing?
We're doing absolutely fine.
Salama sana.
Yeah.
All right. Remember, we are live on Facebook and on our website at www.kbc.co.ke. If at all you have questions, comments, and feedback, remember to use the hashtag Good Morning Kenya on Twitter, at KBC Channel 1. Tag me at Ram Aguko, at Jane Omboy, at Ray Manyara, and at Doreen Arange. You can also tag them at Mediheal H.
Yeah. On Twitter.
On Twitter.
Yeah.
All right. So, Mr. Kumar, the impact of COVID-19 on the healthcare is going to be felt in a very big way. Yeah. But I would like to start, first of all, by illustrating this. It is estimated that Africans spend $3.8 billion annually seeking healthcare overseas. Yeah. And in Kenya, we have over 10,000 people who travel annually to seek medical services out of the borders. But that is not the case, because for most people, we believe that all Kenyans or most Kenyans normally travel abroad. Yeah. But there's a different case here where we have people who normally come into the country to seek medical services. Yeah. And Kenya was rising as a medical tourism destination, especially here in Africa. We have so many people coming into Kenya to seek medical services. With the effect of COVID-19, how will this change these kind of numbers?
It's a good question, Ram, to start with. I think as most of the industries have been adversely affected because of COVID-19. Yeah. Among them, healthcare has been one of them, which has been, in a big way, has been affected because it directly impacts the lives of people. Now, when you talk about medical tourism, one thing which the world has seen in a very unprecedented way, the challenges that are being thrown at people. Because medical tourism always depends on factors like proximity of the treating destination and travel connections, and also accommodation, hotel facilities. Of course, treatment always has the first top priority. Now, because of travel restrictions, what we have seen in the recent past times, even the top destinations like US, Singapore, India, Thailand have been very, very negatively impacted because there has been no travel at all, right? So there has been needs for the people to meet their treatment needs. People travel, both we have inbound medical tourism and outbound medical tourism, where people travel from Kenya to countries like, let's say, India or Dubai, which we call as outbound medical tourism. At the same time, silently, there has been a growth in terms of inbound medical tourism also into Kenya, especially from Central East African countries and Southern African countries, and few countries like Nigeria and all from Western African countries also, which has been largely impacted because of COVID and because of the restrictions on travel movement.
But there's this belief mostly that for someone to get the best healthcare services, you cannot find it in Kenya. But you're bringing it differently.
I think
that it is possible.
It is possible. It is possible. It is very much possible. I think there is a big gap in terms of awareness. Most of the people today, like for example, let's say at Mediheal, we have successfully completed about more than 85 kidney transplants so far in this country with a 98% success rate. Right? Most of the people are not aware.
For kidney transplants.
For kidney transplants. So I'm giving just as an example of that. Now we have a medical oncologist on board. We have a pediatric endocrinologist on board, which are a super specialty services, which very few people know that this country has got that kind of bandwidth to offer the healthcare services. I can put it on a scale, let's say, of what India is offering or elsewhere is being offered. About 80 to 85% of the services, except for the services like, let's say, bone marrow transplant or liver transplant or things like that. Remaining, all those things are offered in the country today.
And if at all you look at the borders, because for Africa, we spend $3.8 billion
Yeah.
US dollars.
Yeah.
We are yet to translate that into the different currencies that are there in Africa, and even in shillings. But now we have closed our borders,
Yeah.
and for most countries across the world, they have closed the borders.
Yes.
People are not moving except for cargo.
Yeah.
But now, how is this going to affect even revenue, the
Yeah.
inflow and outflow
Yeah.
of the same across borders, considering that we'll need healthcare services being delivered?
Yeah. Before we get to that point of medical tourism revenue,
Yeah.
which is depend on the foreign currency and depends on the people movement, let's talk about the domestic healthcare revenue itself, right? Within the country itself. Now, what we have seen in the last 1.5 months, there has been a sharp decline in terms of revenue, because let's say our protocols and our system, and which doesn't allow, let's say at this point in time, to perform any elective surgeries and let's say kidney transplants. We're not doing any kidney transplants as of now, because of the certain conditions and restrictions. So that itself has put a lot of burden on private healthcare sector, which your revenues has been down. At the same time, there has been an additional cost, in terms of providing PPE to the healthcare providers, healthcare staff, right? And also using additional measures like sanitization and arranging triage, special triage arrangements, in terms of screening the people outside the hospital, providing special OPDs in terms of respiratory clinics, so that you don't allow if anybody having those symptoms of COVID, so that they get and mingle with the normal patients and, to avoid the spread of the COVID basically. So all these additional measures have put an additional cost implication on service providers like us, where the revenues have come down. So it's been a very tricky situation, and it's quite challenging to meet when your revenues are down and when your cost goes up to keep the operations alive.
Because you're restricted in your movement and in your area of operations.
Yes.
Now, that is revenue within domestic revenue in Kenya.
Absolutely, because if you look at the revenue-wise, if you segregate emergency services, elective surgeries, elective surgeries almost contribute to 50 to 60% of the revenue of any private healthcare provider. Now, that has been largely impacted. No, but what we also need to understand is these elective surgeries that are there might become emergency in a short span of time if those are not being addressed on a case-to-case basis. If we just generalize things and adopt a corporate strategy saying that all these services comes under elective surgeries and we don't have to address this at this point in time, but it's not too far when this will become an emergency and it's like sitting on a time bomb. That can become another major issue in the healthcare. Yeah.
But now, going back to still on the effects of this on medical tourism, as a nation, we are having certain challenges, especially when it comes to getting products, getting drugs, and getting what is we can call medical equipment. How long do you think it may take us to be able to acquire some of these things? How has it been for you, especially now that you are in the private sector, to acquire some of these drugs? Because over-the-counter drugs are also reducing in terms of the supply.
Yeah. See, COVID-19 has thrown certain kind of challenges to countries, to economies, to societies, to different domains, be it IT domain or logistic domain or healthcare domain. Now, coming back to healthcare domain, what we need to understand is that if you look at the evolution of any healthcare system of any country, be it US, be it India or Thailand or any of these countries, Singapore, it takes good 25 to 30 years for a system to evolve. Unlike
30 years.
30 years. Unlike if you look at a telecom industry or let's say automobile industry. Why I say this? Because let's say there are many countries which have not seen a black and white TV in their life, right? But they have a plasma TV, LED TV and all these things. So there was not a gradual progression. If you look at telecom, let's say today people have the best of the smartphones, but they would have not seen how does a landline looks like. So that's evolution what I'm talking about. And that's how gradually things will grow, which can happen. You don't see the basic thing, but you see something happening suddenly or the very ultra-modern thing.
The end result.
End result. But in healthcare, it doesn't happen that way. For you to need to have, let's say, a super specialist, right? a medical oncologist or a nephrologist, you need to have an MBBS doctor in the first place, you need to have a physician in the second place, and then you will have a super specialist in the form of either nephrologist or a medical oncologist, so on and so forth.
You cannot skip any step.
You cannot skip. So that's the beauty of healthcare. So that's why it takes a very good, I'm talking about like 25 to 30 years. Now, in that lifespan, in that product life cycle, now where we are is what it matters. Like when we compare to US or the advanced countries, what we are seeing today, I'll come to that point again. How we draw the similarities between the top countries today and between Kenya, things like that. So we are almost there. Let's say 80% when I spoke, we are almost there. But the learning point for us is the dependency, be it in terms of treatment dependency or be it in terms of dependency on consumables, on machinery, on equipment. I think the time has come where we need to give an emphasis, and that should be a major takeaway or the take-home message from this pandemic, that we should have less dependency on countries like China or India or other countries, where we give impetus our own manufacturing sector of, be it, let's say, masks or sanitizers or pharmaceuticals or equipments, medical equipments. Yeah.
When you've mentioned quite a lot, and I would like to start with one thing that you've mentioned, that it takes years for the health sector to evolve, to grow gradually.
Yes.
Looking at the growth of the health sector in Kenya and how it has been hard hit by the pandemic right now, would you say that we are likely to recover? Looking at how long Kenya has taken to reach the far that it reached.
Yeah. This scenario is very peculiar, basically. Why I want to say this is, when COVID-19 happened, people would have thought, you see, you always have some guesswork, some case studies coming out by Boston, McKinsey, and PwC and things like that, but sometimes they might go wrong. For example, when Ebola happened, they thought, West African countries like, let's say, Liberia, and even currently it is there in Congo to some extent. When they gave the statistics worst case scenario, it didn't work out that way. Because things got better and people started adopting newer lifestyles and better lifestyles, so things started changing.
Like in Kenya, we were given statistics
by WHO.
By WHO.
Recent, I think about a couple of weeks back, there was statistics which said that at least 3.3 billion people would be affected and 1 million people would die. I don't think that might happen. Yeah. How it's going to unfold, we don't know. That's the worst case scenario. But what I'm trying to draw your attention to at this point in time is, when it happened, people would have thought the third world countries, right? Let it be India or Bangladesh or most of the African countries would be affected because of it. But on the contrary, what we are seeing today is one of the best healthcare systems in the world. France has been rated as one of the, not the best, not one of the best, but the best. It's the number one as rated as in the healthcare system. Like France, United States, Spain, right? So these are all the top countries in the healthcare system which have been actually badly affected. If you look at the top 5 countries today with the highest death rates in 3.6 million people who have got affected and 255,000 deaths that have happened, right? In that, the top deaths, if you take at the rate like US 75,000 and then Italy, France. So these are the top countries which are occupying the space. On the contrary, right? So what matters here is, because the treatment has got a lot of limitations. In coronavirus, right? So what matters is how effectively you will be able to prevent from spreading this. So that's what matters.
You had written an article, I don't know if it was a piece, that you had mentioned that Kenya has got the most advanced infrastructure with ultra-modern facilities in healthcare.
Yes.
And according to a recent report by the Netherlands Enterprise Agency, the private health sector in Kenya is one of the most developed and dynamic in sub-Saharan Africa. Yeah. That's what you said when you were talking about the rise of Kenya as a preferred healthcare destination in Africa.
Yes.
Would you still say that we can still remain to be the same, even post-COVID-19?
It will be, and I believe that it's going to get much better than that. Why I say this? Because now when I say, like, let's say France is the number 1 country in the world in healthcare. Now there are a lot of factors that involves, number of beds the number of beds available in the country, and the number of healthcare staff available in the country, number of specialties that are available in the country, along with infrastructure. Now if you look at our own geography as a continent, there are many countries, even today, without a proper, diagnostic facilities in place, proper MRI or proper CTs in place. There are still several countries. So in that matter, if you take it Kenya, we are far, far ahead. Today we are actually competing with South Africa and Egypt and matured healthcare systems.
At the same level?
At the same level, actually.
Wow.
Now, what matters is when you have infrastructure like that, when you have skill sets like that to offer, at what cost you deliver is what matters. So today, when we rise above the nations which doesn't have a good infrastructure to provide good infrastructure and good healthcare services, right? And when I say, like, they say cardiac services, oncology, very few countries in Africa, like about 3 or 4 countries have got what you call a PET scan facility, which today Kenya has got to offer. So what I'm trying to say is about the infrastructure and the skill set. Now, how you articulate that? Like at Mediheal, the vision has been to offer the world-class services at a very affordable cost to a common Vainanchi, right? So how you articulate that at a very cost-effective model is what matters in moving forward.
Moving forward. Yeah. And earlier on, you mentioned something about manufacturing.
Exactly. That's where I'm coming to actual next point, that to make it happen, yes, you need to have a good manufacturing sector in place wherein you don't have to depend for your pharmaceuticals, for your consumables on other countries, so that if today Thailand or India are able to offer the same surgery which has been done in some part of the other country, some part of the world at a higher cost, it's because of their own ability to manufacture things and have their own consumables and pharmaceuticals, and because they're all part of the healthcare system.
Can Kenya manufacture its own healthcare products?
We can. I think that's where I think the government is also heading. Keeping as a 4 pillars, one of the top agenda, healthcare has to be part of that, universal healthcare, and then manufacturing, shelter and food production. I think the task has been identified in the right way, but how we execute, it takes time for each country, depending on their own capacity to execute that.
I remember you had mentioned there about manufacturing, that we need to manufacture our own in a way that we don't have to depend on other countries,
yes,
to get supplies.
Yeah, if you'd like today, take the classic example, a mask which costs basically at a 6 shilling or 7 shilling cost. If today it is like 50 shilling, 60 shilling, why is it? Because we depend on somebody else, right? If it is available in the country, local manufacturing, which is taking place now. You see the small cottage industries, small industries that is coming up. Now the cost is coming down. Now it's available like say 30, 35 shillings and things like that. So that's a classic example.
If you look at similarities, comparing Kenya and how other countries are doing in order to curb this COVID-19, specifically on the health sector, would you say that we are on the right track?
We are on the right track, and we are doing as one of the in the country, and also in the continent, and also as compared to other countries. Because if you look at right from the beginning, the moment it's been identified in March that we had the first positive case, the kind of implementation that has been taken place in terms of lockdown, in terms of curfew, in terms of identifying the hotspot zones and then seizing them off. I think what we are also trying to do, what I like the best is happening is balancing act. You're not going for complete, let's say, shutdown kind of thing where things might go out of the hand, things might get jeopardized. But then we are trying to play a balancing act, looking at the livelihood of the people, and also containing the zones which are high on coronavirus.
Have we had a difference in terms of the inpatient and outpatients coming into the hospitals during this pandemic? How has the numbers been affected?
Yes. So what happens usually, most of your IP actually depends from the OP, apart from the elective surgeries. Let's say medical management of some cases, people who are on diabetes and let's say asthma, pulmonary conditions, and BP and things like that. Yeah. So those are when your OP comes down, automatically it has the effect on your IP also, right? Now, because of this COVID-19, even there is a general tendency in the people that should avoid the visiting clinics and hospitals, things like that.
Are they afraid?
They are, yeah. Keeping that in mind, what we did, we already have this facility of digital consultation through telemedicine, right? So a lot of consultations now happens through digital space, through telemedicine. And as long as it's necessary for the person to visit the hospital, to come and get admitted, it happens. Otherwise, we try to address the issues through telemedicine for now.
You've mentioned that telemedicine, and that is exactly where I was coming into. Okay. How far are we when it comes to providing telemedicine, in terms of telemedicine to our people, considering that people are different in terms of the classes, in terms of the income, in terms of infrastructure, different in terms of availability of resources. Talk about internet and technology. How far are we in telemedicine?
See,
as
for
a
any
nation?
technology to be delivered and for any revolution to happen, especially in healthcare, what we have seen over the years in all these countries, the countries that I've mentioned, let's say Singapore, Thailand, India, it's the private and the public sector put together, joined hands, and were able to deliver, something significant, which we evidence, which we see today. Similarly, when it comes to countries in Africa, the private players are able to do it as of now. I think the government
like Medihill
also need to, like Medihill,
Okay.
we are offering these services. We are offering these services also because, as I've mentioned you earlier, a part of our conversation, that a lot of patients comes to our hospital from, let's say, Congo, Nigeria, Somalia, and Uganda. So we have our information centers in these places, and then when patient wants to have a consultation with our specialist, we try to provide the consultation services online, which is through telemedicine.
Okay.
Now we are using that facility and that platform largely for the local population also.
Is it effective?
It's effective. It's quite effective. Actually it has given much more weightage to this facility, though it was earlier there as a value-add service now, but it has become a norm.
What's the government input so far in terms of telemedicine?
No, see, if we want to deliver healthcare services in conditions like this, which was absolutely unprecedented, nobody has ever thought, see, in our generation, nobody would have ever thought that something is going to happen like this.
Yeah.
It is absolutely like a World War scenario. Except for hearing the gunshots or bombs, going off, everything that has the ramifications of a world war, you can see it today.
You can see it, yeah.
Flights are down, borders have been seized, people are losing jobs, economies have got impacted. Everything it is there.
Do you feel their input towards telemedicine? Can you feel their input? Do you feel like they are doing something
Moving forward
towards the private sector?
Yes, moving forward, the private sector, what they have been doing in a robust way now, it is the time that even NGOs and governments and other hospital people who are there to adopt the newer technologies in terms of delivering healthcare services on digital space. Yeah.
Have you had a surge in medical, let me say, manpower, in manpower, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic, because people are afraid of going to some specific places, considering that they say that if you are hard to be coughing, some may get stigmatized that, hey, you may have coronavirus. So you'll experience a slight drop in the number of people who are coming to the hospitals to seek medical attention.
Yeah. No, that's where what I'm trying to say is when there has been, this is a momentary thing that's happening now, which has happened all of a sudden, and over a period of time, once it subsides, it may go down.
Yes.
But this phase has given impetus to adopt newer technologies.
Telemedicine.
Telemedicine is one among them. There are several other things. Let's say the technologies that we would have been adopting 5 years down the line or 8 years down the line. Now, this scenario has created a need that we adopt those technologies now kind of thing. For example, let's say we have been contemplating at the management level today that we should have robot screening, triage from the robot services, so that you have less manpower requirement, and then patients have been screened by robots, and then once you prove it's a non-COVID thing, then it goes to a different clinic. But once it has been proven that he has the symptoms of a COVID thing, then he goes to a different clinic, and things like that. So thermal scanners,
you've managed to reduce human interaction through having robotics.
Yes. Yeah, in the initial phase, so that you stop the spreading of coronavirus. That's the objective. How do you stop it? When there is a human-to-human interaction, there's always a chance to happen. But when you put the digital things in place, that you stop the spread and then effectively control it. Yeah, like thermal scanners you put, and then you put the triage services, and then you have the robotic services in terms of screening. So all these things will help you in terms of containing the spread of coronavirus, which is the major challenge at this point in time.
Well, just something to note. How has it affected you when you're going to work, knowing that the coronavirus is there? The vice president, at Medihill Group of Hospitals. Has it affected your work relations with people? Just in passing.
We are trying to take precaution in some terms of social distancing.
Okay.
Because we are not immune to not having coronavirus. We are also human beings.
Yeah,
we also acquire corona. So the doctors, the nursing staff, they are all the frontline workers who are there, who are the warriors, at this point in time, are all very susceptible to acquire coronavirus.
Okay.
But enough measures have been taken now in terms of social distancing, in terms of hand washing techniques, in terms of sanitization, in terms of wearing masks. So all that is required is being put in place so that you are not also impacted because of the situation, because you need to serve a larger population.
And that's how you come up with this desire to have robots and other technologies being
Yes.
implemented in the health sector
Yeah.
to help reduce such kind of stigmatization
Exactly.
and spread of coronavirus.
Exactly.
And now you've talked about technology, and what clicks in my mind is innovation.
Innovation.
Post COVID-19, what more innovations do you see coming into place in the health sector?
You will see a lot of innovation, because why I'm saying this, the products that are there in the pipeline, be it equipment-wise and be it products-wise, more largely were on conditions like, let's say, cancer, diabetes, and things like that.
Yes.
Antibiotics, if you see, it has got a less pipeline because of the shelf life and because of the commercial viability of the product. But moving forward, you'll definitely see a lot of investments happening in terms of viral containing the viruses. And in those areas, you'll see a lot of innovation that's happening. And also in the country itself, giving emphasis on infection control management. And let's say a private sector like Mediheal Group of Hospitals, we have one of the robust ICU care management infection control systems in place, which will become a norm moving forward, that in terms of infection control and in terms of having the ICUs and ventilators in place to address any this kind of pandemics that are going to happen or take place in future.
Okay. And now, how has the society, been affected during this pandemic? Because we are having the contributions that are being given by government, by NGOs, by entities, by people who are who are involved in giving of charity. Do you see this even trickling in to have a ripple effect on the health? On healthcare, and as a private sector, what are you doing to cushion the society around you?
Two questions to address this. Whatever the NGOs or the government and other people are doing in terms of taking care of people, it has to be done, because when I say prevention is the only best option as of now what we have. So people work from home as much as possible and then maintain social distance. And for that to happen, people should be taken care of their livelihood, which I think by and large NGOs or WHO grants and things like that which are coming in place are taking care of these things. From a hospital perspective, what we are trying to do is bring as much as awareness as possible. Right from the beginning, in the last 2 months, if you have seen our campaigns on social media like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, about maintaining social distance, hand washing techniques.
I saw a billboard somewhere along the streets of Nairobi.
Yes.
I don't know where that was.
Yeah, it was on Gong Road.
Gong Road.
Yeah, near Afia House. And then we have a few in Nakuru and few in Eldoret. And most of these important junctions, we have put billboards in terms of bringing awareness of about the coronavirus to common people, to understand the ramifications if you acquire it, how to prevent it, more importantly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in terms of that stigmatization, do we have any measures that we can put in place so that the Kenyans can be able to embrace the fact that the challenge is there?
Yeah.
And we don't have to feel stigmatized, even for people who have recovered and those who have been able to be counted among those that have been confirmed of COVID-19.
People who have recovered, we have to support them, because there are some treatment options which are there, which are being taken into consideration, that the plasma that is being, the person who has been treated because of the coronavirus can be used to treat the patients who are undergoing the treatment, which are still under investigation. A lot of treatment options that are there, treatment modalities which are still yet to be taken as a proven thing, because we also see one of the prevention aspect which is happening about the vaccination that is going to find out. We have seen recently in the news that Oxford University is already started the trials, which we might see by September or October, the outcome of it, and millions of doses have been already started manufacturing, right? So if that goes right, we don't know as of now, that might that might be successful, or it might not be successful also. But then if it is successful, then we have some sort of solution coming by, let's say, September or October, in terms of at least prevention through the form of vaccine. But what is more importantly at this point in time is, this is a challenge that's staring at our face. We don't have to feel it as a stigmatization and things like that. It's a question of survival. Your own hygiene pattern, your own lifestyle, right? Especially people who are at more vulnerable, like with comorbid conditions like, let's say, diabetes, BP, kidney conditions, and people who are suffering from cancer and things like that need to be very, very careful. Have hand hygiene techniques. I mean, keep yourself sanitization, wear mask when you go to public places, avoid public places, maintain social distancing. Next 2-3 months is going to be very, very challenging, and we need to follow all these techniques, change the lifestyle pattern.
How would you compare the different healthcare systems in different countries here in Africa?
Africa, as I said, we compare ourselves today with the more evolved healthcare systems.
Outside the continent.
Outside the continent.
We compare ourselves with other countries.
Let's say compare inside the continent, and then we can compare with outside the continent.
Okay, yes.
Let's say when we compare inside the continent with South Africa or Egypt, and then bordering countries like, let's say, Tunisia or Morocco, on northern side of Africa, we almost deliver what they are delivering today. But we need to work on our own cost factor and things like that. But when you look at countries like Thailand, India, or US, or European countries, we have got another step to achieve, right, in terms of, let's say, stem cell therapies or organ transplantation, which are happening on a wide scale. Let's say liver transplants, lung transplant, heart transplant, bone marrow transplant. We have come so far on this journey. Even kidney transplant is not a small thing, right?
It's a big thing.
So it's a big thing.
And expensive.
With that success rates, right? If a patient is going outward somewhere, like people who come to us from, let's say, Congo or Uganda, they go to India or to some other country, South Africa, they pay 3 million shillings or 3.5 million shillings in total. I'm talking about as a package. But whereas in Kenya, they can get it less than half of that cost.
What lessons do you think we can pick from countries that people normally go to seek medical attention? We have India, we have Turkey, we have Brazil.
Yeah.
Name them.
Yeah.
What are the lessons that we can derive from how other jurisdictions are handling this COVID-19 that we can implement?
Yeah.
As a
it's a very interesting question.
Kenya?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. Now you see these countries, Brazil that you have mentioned, Brazil, India. Let's keep India and Thailand aside for a moment. Brazil, South Africa, Turkey. Yeah, all these countries actually fall in the top 10 of today's COVID, having maximum number of deaths. I don't know. It's a very ironical thing that the systems which are with very high infrastructure, the best what we call. Let's say start from US, Germany, France, Italy, UK, Turkey, South Africa, Singapore. These are all the countries which are badly hit.
They're the most affected.
They're the most affected countries. What we can learn on a positive side is to be prepared if something like that also happens to us in terms of more number of cases getting positive and more number of cases getting, to be admitted in ICU. Because as you know that, in people who are having diagnosed positive, not everybody will get admitted in the hospital. Yes. Not everybody puts on ICU. But if a situation like that arrives, we need to be ready with our infrastructure and with our medical faculty.
Now, the Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga has been able to call out for reforms in Kenya's health sector. And according to him, he says, he sent a tweet and said that institutions like the National Hospital Insurance Fund, the NHIF, the KEMRI, the Kenya Medical Research Institute, should be strengthened to ensure that they are more independent. But now, he says that Kenya must start questioning the dominance of U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Unit, and instead allow its equivalents in the country to fill in the vacuum. Now, he said that, and I quote, "Let's question the dominance of U.S. CDC over KEMRI and its equivalents in Africa and seek ways to make these institutions independent, more attuned to Africa's needs." What's your thoughts on this?
I completely agree with him because, in most of the case studies, what we have seen, as is rightly mentioned, CDC, Center for Disease Control, draws always some guidelines based on some prognosis outcomes that happens after a clinical trial.
Yes.
Now, COVID-19 has given a scenario where we really need to look at it. Because if you look at the corona strain, the study says that the strain that is there in India is different from the strain that has been found in Europe and the strain that has been found in US, right? So what I'm trying to say is human beings react differently. So I echo with his thoughts that this institution should be independent in nature in the first place. And also, we should have something equivalent of a CDC what America has for the African population.
So
because African population,
CDC
we should have. Because your Asian population reacts differently, your African population reacts differently, your US population, so different race react differently to the drugs or to the trials or to the certain conditions. So we need to have, moving forward, institutions which are independent in nature, they take their own decisions, and also equivalent bodies like CDC for different continents.
We have had this kind of a call that we need to have CDC for different continents. Do you think that as a nation, are we headed towards that direction?
I think Kenya should drive these initiatives, because as a leader in the region, and also especially in healthcare, because the kind of patient safety policies that we have, the kind of protocols that we have, anyway we have discussed about infrastructure. So Kenya should take the lead in terms of driving things like this in moving forward. And you also asked a question to me that what lessons do we learn from countries like Turkey, from Brazil? They market themselves well. In today's scenario, what happens is anything that goes wrong, everybody talks about it. We do 9 right things, nobody talks about it. We do one thing wrong and the whole world talks about it. A couple of years back, we know about the neurosurgery thing, that the whole world was talking. CNN was talking, BBC was talking. Do you think things don't go wrong in US or in Europe? We are seeing what's happening now. There are several things that goes wrong there also, but people don't talk about it. People talk about the good things, positive things. I think the time has come that where we also promote Kenya as a brand, talk positive things that are happening in this country, so that we give a positive message to people that Kenya is a place which can address their healthcare needs in the region.
You're talking about positive things. Now let me pick one positive thing that happened here in Kenya, and let's talk about that. We had students, Kenyatta University students, who challenged people, and they came up with ventilators. Now, remember, we are discussing the effects of this coronavirus. Honorable Raila Odinga said this, and I quote, "When donors are overwhelmed in their own countries, as is the case now, we are left badly exposed." Kenyatta University students have challenged us that with encouragement from government and private sector, innovation for healthcare can be done here by us.
Yes.
Do you believe that right now, the exposure that we have gotten, based on this statement, that we are left badly exposed, the exposure that we have as a nation is something that is a wake-up call for innovators in the health sector to be able to come up and bring sustainable solutions?
Very good. I mean, it's a very valid point, and you put it very well, in a sustainable way. See, any innovation, if it has to last long, it has to be on some fundamental research that happens, right? And I think the time has come where really we need to look at things to happen innovative, and there is no dearth for talent, in the country. It's all, what matters is how well we should be able to support, both from government point of view and from private sector point of view, that we support innovations like this, the ventilator that we're talking about. And there are many more other things that we are aware that are happening in this part of the world, which not either the Western world is not aware, or it's been suppressed by some self-interest entities, right? But all said and done, I think the time has come where things need to be looked at and emphasis should be given on innovation, so that we also stand out and address the maladies that are there, the solutions to provide, especially in the healthcare arena.
Now, according to, there was a report by Africa's Pulse report, says that Kenya is one of the countries punching below its weight in terms of availability and allocation of financing towards the healthcare sector. And, not just the healthcare sector, but also investing much less than it should on personnel and medical facilities. Kenya is spreading on healthcare per capita for each person, according to the World Health Organization, is $66. We're talking about around 7,000 Kenyan shillings against a recommended level of $86. which is 9,110 shillings of for low-income countries. What's the ripple effect of this on the health sector?
It will definitely have its effect when the budget is being allocated. It's the nation priorities, social security in terms of food and in terms of healthcare, education, border security. All these things becomes imperative when the government allocates the budgets, understanding priorities what they have. Definitely there is a need for the government to allocate more funds and more budgets towards healthcare. Because if you look at, again, one of the understanding point, if you look at countries like Singapore or the much evolved healthcare countries, the budget allocation towards the healthcare and education in particular is very, very high, because it's the belief system, that good education will give you good citizens in terms of highly skilled labor, caliber, right? And also protecting their health for being productive. Let's say if a person is on dialysis, he becomes, non-productive for the family, for the society. But you bring back him to normal life, he becomes productive for the family and also for the society.
So far, right? as a nation, we have used over 3 billion shillings on this COVID-19 pandemic. Do you think we need to invest more? And how can we have more influx compared to what we are spending? Because, yes, we are spending more money, but where is it coming from?
No, this is a short-term scenario where you are addressing the challenges that are there on ground for now. But if you have to look at a long-term, innovation and delivering the solutions to address this kind of situations in future or in the normal conditions that are already existing. Now we are talking about the communicable disease. Now, last 1.5 months, the whole world is talking about corona and about the communicable disease. What about the non-communicable diseases that the country is being challenged with? You have diabetes, you have lifestyle diseases like blood pressure, you have cancer patients.
We have forgotten about them all.
Yeah, non-communicable diseases are forgotten, right? But then that will become a challenge in a time span if those are not been addressed, right? So it has to be a balance between both non-communicable and communicable, that how we address these challenges and use the funds in an appropriate way. The world is looking at Africa today, right? If you have coming back to again the positive framework, positive mind of frame, what I'm saying, if you project country as a Kenya as a brand, right? People will do come and invest in terms of infrastructure, in terms of innovation.
Okay, okay. Let's talk about the society, because I want us all to even get a glimpse. As Mid-Hill, what are you doing to help the society around you?
Excuse me. In the first place, when I spoke about the prevention, that's how our tagline goes, patient prevents, doctor treats, the God who heals ultimately.
I love that.
Right? Yeah. So that's our tagline. So what we're trying to do is...
Just repeat that one more time.
Yeah, it's the patient who prevents,
yes,
doctor treats, and God heals.
Amen.
And we believe in that.
Yeah.
And this is our value system, which has been embedded in every employee who works with this organization. Right? So in this scenario, what we're trying to do is, we are working on the first aspect of it, where patient can actually prevent it.
Yeah.
When it goes beyond the prevention mode, and when really need, that's where we come into picture as Medi-Hill Group of Hospitals. And we believe in embedding newer technologies into the ecosystem, right? And then delivering higher level healthcare, which is of world class, and also trying to put it at a very minimal cost to the patient so that it doesn't affect his pocket, which is also one of the values of the universal healthcare.
Have you been giving out face masks? People are donating things.
We have been doing our part, we have been doing, distributing face masks, sanitization equipment, and then the sanitizers and these things have been distributed from our side. As a corporate social responsibility, we have been doing this.
How far is your reach? I'm aware you are in Kenya and Rwanda.
At all the 9 centers where we are located, both in Kenya and in Rwanda, we have special thermal scanners for people, so that we take the history of the patient, symptomatic, non-symptomatic, asymptomatic, right? And also providing the sanitization things at all the locations, and also screening triage, as we have discussed, is being provided at all the places, so that we separate these patients from COVID and non-COVID thing.
Now, as we bring this to a closer, if someone wants to reach out to you for questions and inquiries, how can they do that?
We have our email IDs. which is query@medihillgroup.com, and also info@medihillgroup.com. They can shoot their queries, and also we are available on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, which they can also reach us. We have a very robust website through which they can reach us. So there are various options available for people to get in touch with us.
Now, final question, Kumar. When you look at the healthcare sector here in Kenya, and I'm now going to talk about post-COVID-19, because now I've been having discussions with many people, and they say the world will never be the same again.
Absolutely.
Do you believe that it won't be the same again? And you're saying absolutely. If you look at the health sector, will the health sector be able to recover? We talk about getting the input of supply and demand. We're talking about the response of doctor in terms of doctor-patient ratio.
Yeah.
We talk about doctor-doctor ratio. Yeah. How are we going to be doing it?
Let me say once again what you have said. The world is no longer what it used to be post-COVID-19.
Yeah.
As there will be a time frame for each industry to recover, each domain to recover, probably healthcare would be the first to bounce back. That's what most of the studies mention as of now, and it will be indeed, with newer technologies. As I've told you that this situation has given a need where we adopt these technologies which we would have adopted 5 years down the line kind of thing. Yeah. So you will see that newer technologies coming into place. A lot of emphasis will be given on healthcare issues. Let's say people want to become a doctor. Right now they have seen what is the need of a doctor in the society.
Yes.
Right. So that point of, I'm telling from a basic point of view, to having the best of the infrastructure and health awareness, people modifying their lifestyle, changes in lifestyle, and also at healthcare delivery level, you will see a tremendous change in terms of innovation, and also in terms of self-dependency, in terms of pharmaceuticals or consumables and things like that, and getting better technologies.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much for finding time to join me this morning. I was with the Gokul Prem Kumar, the Vice President, Business Relations at Mid-Hill Group of Hospitals. You're doing a good job. Keep it up.
Thank you so much, Ram.
Right.
Together, tuko pamoja.
Tuko pamoja.
Yeah.
Komesha
Corona, yeah.
Komesha Corona.
Yeah.
Keep the tweets coming in. The hashtag, as always, is Good Morning Kenya. Well, that brings us to the end of this morning conversation, to the end of Good Morning Kenya. As always, it has been a pleasure being with you from the time we started till now. May God bless you. May God bless the work of your hands. My name is Ram Aguko.